I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents Week in Review. Our biggest story is still developing as the week comes to a close. Peace slipping further away in the Middle East. Rockets fill the air, troops are on the move, and a ceasefire lasted only minutes. Israel promised to halt military operations this morning while the Prime Minister of Egypt visited Gaza. Moments after the Egyptian leader arrived, Hamas launched more than 25 rockets at Israel. Israeli F-16 jets responded. The terrorists are now targeting Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Now, at the same time, the Israeli Defense Forces warned Palestinians to stay away from members of Hamas because, quote, the second phase is coming. The full-scale fighting is now 3 days old. The visit by the Egyptian Prime Minister Hashem Kandil set off a wild scene of scrambling bodyguards, reporters, and workers at a Gaza hospital when he visited wounded patients. Kandil says he came to Gaza to provide political support and encourage a ceasefire, a marked change from the threats coming from Cairo yesterday. He was accompanied by the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, who spoke about the wounded brought into the hospital.
Kandil and I were among many who received the injured here in the Shifa hospital, and I myself carried along with the PM the dead body of the 1-year-old Mohammed Yasser, who was martyred a few minutes ago by an Israeli airstrike that targeted a house full of innocent victims. This is the blood of our children and our people, the blood of our Palestinian people that stained our clothes and that of the Egyptian Prime Minister. We are here to say that the blood here is one and the wound is one.
The visit is the first top-level trip by an Egyptian leader to Gaza since 2007. The Israelis, meanwhile, are massing troops and tanks on the border. An invasion order seems imminent. The ambassador to Washington says a wider war may be necessary.
Prime Minister of Israel has to go into a bomb shelter. Imagine if the President of the United States had to go into the bomb shelter. Imagine if what the equivalent would be in the United States, 150 million Americans were under rocket fire. What kind of steps the United States would take to ensure the safety of its citizens. Those are the type of steps that we are going to have to take.
The fierce fighting was set off following a sustained rocket assault by Hamas on Israel and the retaliatory assassination by Israel of the Hamas military commander. He was buried yesterday. Gunfire echoed through the streets of Gaza City as the body was accompanied by hundreds of Palestinians. The targeted killing of Hamas leaders is a tactic that Israel had not used for more than 4 years. The change in tactics comes as the terrorists launched more than 400 rockets just last week. And now, for the first time ever, they are able to reach Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. While the Israeli military are assembling thousands of infantry and paratroops on the border, they are estimating the Hamas arsenal is more than 13,000 rockets strong. Meantime, the Catholic Bishop of the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem is deploring the vicious circle of violence now underway. Bishop William Shimali is calling for an end to the fighting because, quote, innocent people are dying. He says Egypt and the United States must take steps to find a solution. More than 24 people have been killed, including several children. A new and remarkable development in this war is that the fighting is not only on the ground, it is also online.
Rockets and bombs in Gaza, but the war is also fought online. A battle for public opinion, Israeli forces versus Hamas, both using the internet to get their messages out. At the exact moment Israeli Defense Forces began hitting their targets in Gaza, they sent out this tweet. The IDF has begun a widespread campaign on terror sites and operatives in the Gaza Strip. Moments later, they posted video of the deadly airstrike that killed the head of Hamas's military wing. Hamas's Al-Qassam brigade was quick to respond with its own tweet, confirming the death of its top leader. The war of words had begun. Well, the Israeli Defense Forces are live tweeting about their actions using a few hashtags, but most notably hashtag Pillar of Defense. Meanwhile, Al-Qassam Brigades has come back with their hashtag Gaza Under Attack. Both sides have been issuing threats online. Just take a look at what the IDF put out, a rather dry statement saying, we recommend that no Hamas operatives, whether low-level or senior leaders, show their faces above ground in the days ahead. And not to be outdone, the Al-Qassam Brigades responded directly to IDF spokesperson, saying, our blessed hands will reach your leaders and soldiers wherever they are. you have opened the gates of hell on yourselves. So there you have it, the war of words online. For every strike, it seems, there is a corresponding tweet or video post with links and graphics. A war of information, battling for hearts and minds online, no less critical than winning the war on the ground.
The latest pillar of defense tweet says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is ready to expand the military operation into Gaza. Currents Week in Review continues after the break. Welcome back to Currents Week in Review. Mayor Bloomberg is now saying that gas rationing in New York may continue through Thanksgiving. The recovery from Hurricane Sandy is our other big story this week, and rationing in the city was supposed to end this Sunday. But Bloomberg says since a lot of people use gasoline on Thanksgiving, he may continue to limit supply. No firm decision yet. He has to think about it. Now, this dramatic video has just been released. It shows the inside of the PATH train station in Hoboken as the floodwaters from the hurricane roared on in, turning the platform into a churning lake. The station is still closed. Meanwhile, the Queens Midtown Tunnel is open again to all drivers. The tunnel was flooded by the storm surge. After it was pumped dry, mechanical systems had to be repaired. It was the first time the tunnel, which runs under the East River between Manhattan and Queens, had flooded in its 72-year history. The Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, though, is still closed. But there has been another reopening, St. Rose of Lima School in Rockaway Beach, Queens, where they are grateful for God's grace.
In St. Rose, we were very fortunate that we had very little damage. The water had drenched the carpeting in 2 offices and 4 classrooms. We had moved very quickly in working with the diocese to get St. Rose reopened, to get a generator. And we were fortunate to have Vinnie Levian from DeSales Media, who acted as our guardian angel. And they worked very hard to support me to get St. Rose open today and bring our children back home, because we consider ourselves a very close-knit family.
Logan?
You just tell the children that there are things that happen that we don't understand, but that we're all a family, and we all love each other, and we all get through things together. That's what we tell them, and that's how we operate here. We always have. Even without a hurricane, it's always been that way.
It's nice for the kids to come back because they get a sense of home, because their homes are destroyed. So when they come here and they see that their teachers are here and that their friends are here, they're okay to be home. This is home to them. St. Rose is home.
If you didn't have children, you could probably hand in and be able to rough it a little bit more, but with the kids, you really want to get them back in their regular routine and comfortable.
Kids get their cues from their parents. If they feel that their parents are able to cope, the kids feel my father, my mother, they're able to manage. So there I'm also be able to manage too.
Presently, we have all grades in classrooms. The 4 rooms that we pulled the carpet up for safety reasons. The carpeting is being replaced as we are speaking.
We evacuated into Philadelphia. So they were willing to take her into one of the parochial schools there too. But good news is that we reopened, so we got back.
For many of the parents, because many of them got back to me, they were thrilled and grateful, and they actually kept their children home because they didn't want to traumatize them more to put them in another school. My staff and my assistant principal were devastated and lost everything in the hurricane.
I had 3 feet of water in my house, so I'm only a single story. So I've lost all my furniture, I've lost all my contents, I've lost all my pictures. You know, everything that meant something to me, I've lost. But I have a wonderful, wonderful family. My brother has been organizing people. They have my house entirely gutted, down to the floorboards and the studs, and he keeps telling me he's good at taking it apart, but he's not good at putting it back together. So I hope he has friends that can help us put it back together.
You have to be strong for the families and the children, and you're trying to be strong yourself, you know, figuring it all out. But that's the one thing you can't doubt or question, because God is the stable in your life. And if you really have that deep inside, then everything else will fall into place.
And I also want to mention that Senator Charles Schumer was also instrumental in securing a new generator to allow the teachers and the children at St. Rose of Lima to return to the classroom. Well, most young people are dialed into social media, including what's known as tweeting, a short message of no more than 140 characters. Now, a Vatican cardinal is saying that Jesus was even more concise. Cardinal Gianfranco Ravisi, the head of the Pontifical Council for Culture, says the Lord eloquently expressed the faith using only 78 Greek characters when he said, "Repent and believe in the gospel." And another great communicator of the faith and one of the most esteemed authors of all time was St. Augustine. His signature book retains remarkable awareness of the human condition to this day.
One of the reasons that the Confessions continues to be one of the widest read books in the history of the world is precisely because of Augustine's insight into human experience. And he does a magnificent job of communicating both his own experience and what he lived, and how that experience can indeed be a window, if you will, an opening to discovering a personal experience of God in human life. Augustine in the Confessions talks about friendship, talks about family, talks about the importance of his mother, talks about his father, talks about human ambition, talks about so many different aspects of human life, and then goes on to explain how these things helped or did not help his own personal pathway to discovering God and to discovering what is really holy about life. In the highly individualistic society that people are growing up in, people think that my experience is the criteria. Am I happy or I'm not happy? What that might really be is, do I feel pleasure or don't I feel pleasure? Or do I feel selfish? And if I feel okay, then that's all that matters. Certainly Augustine's experience says that, well, that isn't enough, and maybe what you're calling happiness isn't authentic happiness, because you're going to lose that too. And most things that people seem to describe as, well, why are you happy today, are things that are either very superficial or at best, important for a short period of time, but that aren't going to last forever. And Augustine gives some insight into helping people understand that having an experience of God brings you far beyond yourself, and that how an authentic experience of happiness has to include other people and has to include being concerned about other people. And those are elements that express, I think, a very important part of the gospel message. It's not just about me and my experience of God either. You might have people say, oh, I have an experience of God and I don't have to do anything else. Well, then that's probably not an authentic experience of God, because as we know from the Gospels, as we know from the apostolic letters, if you love God, then you also need to be showing that by loving your neighbor, and that the two go hand in hand.
Coming up next, the power of music in our faith, as Currents Week in Review continues after the break. Another important story that we followed throughout the week, the big meeting of all the U.S. bishops. Chaz Muth reports on the highlights.
The U.S. bishops opened their fall General Assembly in Baltimore with an emphasis on conversion and a return to the sacrament of penance.
If you want to be a channel, you must first be a reservoir. And what I would suggest this morning, that this reservoir of our lives and ministry, when it comes especially the new evangelization, must first be filled with the spirit of interior conversion born of our own renewal. That's the way we become channels of a truly effective transformation of the world, through our own witness of a repentant heart. And I suggest that begins with our own full embrace of the sacrament of penance.
The Baltimore Assembly came nearly a week after Election Day, prompting the bishops to talk about outcomes they see as continued threats to religious liberty and marriage, with voters approving same-sex marriage measures in 3 states. Voters in another state rejected a constitutional amendment to define marriage as being between one man and one woman.
The urgency around the protection of marriage has grown and is reaching what could be called a critical mass, as you are all well aware. At the state level, prior to last Tuesday, people of 32 states had voted to affirm and protect marriage. And as you know, last week voters cast their ballots on marriage referenda in 4 states: Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, and Washington State. Unfortunately, in all of these states, the marriage protection efforts did not succeed. This is not a time to give up, but rather a time to redouble our efforts.
However, the bishops did celebrate what they view as electoral victories, including the passage of Maryland's version of the DREAM Act, granting in-state tuition to undocumented immigrants brought to this country as children.
And the DREAM Act was sustained, or was passed, 58% to 42%. So that's a pretty good news item. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Now, earlier in the week, we reported on Pope Benedict's meeting with several choirs at the Vatican and his urging them to devote their musical talents to the new evangelization. The Holy Father showing an understanding of the power music has to draw people to God.
On Christmas Day in 1886, a young atheist attended Vespers at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. As the choir sang, he experienced an instantaneous conversion to Christianity. Reflecting on that moment, he would later recount that in an instant his heart was touched and he believed. He believed with a force so great, with a conviction so powerful, that there was no room for any kind of doubt, no reason or circumstance that could either shake his faith or touch it. Pope Benedict recalled this conversion story of the late French dramatist and diplomat Paul Claudel as a case-in-point example of how sacred music has the power to draw people to God and change lives. On Saturday, November 10th, the Pope told a choir group on pilgrimage in Rome to commit themselves to improve the quality of liturgical singing and to recover the great musical tradition of the Church, which, he said, finds its highest expression in Gregorian chant and polyphony. Pope Benedict also recalled the importance of the Second Vatican Council's document on the liturgy, which identified sacred music as central to the Church's evangelizing mission.
Coming up next on Currents Week in Review, Bishop DiMarzio and the school children happy to return to the classroom after the break. Finally, in our Week in Review, the ongoing recovery from the storm. Now, earlier in the program, we told you about the reopening of St. Rose of Lima School in Rockaway Beach. The children also were welcomed back to their classrooms by Bishop DiMarzio, who spoke about it with our news director, Ed Wilkinson, in this latest Into the Deep.
Bishop, nice to see you.
Good to be here.
I understand that you've been visiting at least one school out there in Rockaway that's back online, the children back in school at
Yes.
St. Rose of Lima.
That's right.
What was your visit like?
Well, the children are excited. I think it's the first time I've ever heard children say, "You happy to be in school?" Yes. I guess they're home bored. And a lot of them don't have heat still. I asked them when I went around the division classroom, so some of them are still without electricity and heat. So they're happy to be in a warm place and with their classmates and doing something positive.
Sure. Well, how is it that the school has heat? They have heat and light?
Well, they have a generator that was given to us, I guess, by FEMA, the city. I'm not sure how we got it, but we had talked to Senator Schumer and the mayor, Bloomberg, and I guess they intervened, and we do have that school open. It was not really damaged very much. They had water there, but was pretty much intact, so they were able to open up.
Yeah. So what'd you do? You visited each classroom? Did you speak with the children?
I did. I first we had a little assembly. We would say their morning prayers as they normally do. Then I went to each classroom. I asked the children to tell me what their experience was. Some of them were very happy to do so, and some of them were kind of sad. And all of it, you know, they all lived down there. They all saw this water coming in and came in unexpectedly, really. So they were kind of frightened, but it's good to let them talk about it and get it out of their
Were they willing to talk themselves about it?
They were, yeah. I say about half of the class would raise their hand and say, I don't want to. They would explain what their experience of the hurricane was.
Yeah. Did most of them have to evacuate eventually?
Some of them stayed and some had evacuated, but the people who stayed had the stories because they were there during the whole time.
Yeah. And I understand that you brought along some mail with you that you shared with them.
That's true. Actually, yesterday in the mail, we got about 25 letters from a school in Ohio that were really basically a spiritual bouquet for the children in our diocese. It's Lakewood, Ohio. I don't know where that is, actually. St. Luke's School. This one is really an interesting one. I guess she doesn't say what grade she's in, but she writes, I will say the Our Father 3 times, the Hail Mary 3 times, the Act of Contrition 3 times, to help people find things that blew away, to help people whose houses got destroyed, to find some kind of shelter. I hope people find happiness again. And I pray most of all to the people that were injured during the storm.
Wow.
So it's
like a
obviously
spiritual bouquet.
Small child, a third grader, so I would say third, fourth grade. And they're wonderful, and all the rest of them are beautiful artwork depicting, in a certain sense, what a hurricane might be like, and with an offer of prayers.
Sure.
So it's very nice.
What was the spirit among the principal and the teachers down at St. Rose?
Oh, they're very upbeat. They were very, principal really had put in her head that she was going to reopen, and she kept pushing and said, I can do it. It's clean. The school is okay. And she got it accomplished. Yeah.
They have a pretty big enrollment down there at St. Rose.
They do. They're over 400. They had yesterday about 380, 390, she said. So that was good. They almost have everybody.
Yeah. I know you've been down there a number of times now since the disastrous storm. Do you see any progress being made in the neighborhoods? Does it look a little bit different?
Very slow. There still is no electricity there in that area of Rockaway, and there's no street lights, or traffic lights, so everything is kind of slow. The sand is getting pushed aside. Looks like a snowstorm had happened with its sand, and it's going to be a long time recovery.
What do you say to the people? I know you've been recommending hope and patience to the people there. That it's going to take a long time. What is your message as this thing goes on and on?
Well, I think it's, again, count your blessings. We're coming up with Thanksgiving. It's a time we do count our blessings. Think about the positive things, that there was not a tremendous loss of life. Things are getting back to normal, a new normal, as they're saying down there. I talked to some of the parents this morning who had brought their children, and they were very happy that school was available for their children, getting some kind of normalcy back. The children probably the most resilient. You know, young people, they kind of are able to roll with the punches, you might say, and come back and try to find some meaning. I think it's for the adults it's more difficult. There's a lot of loss, a lot of mourning happening, so it's going to be more difficult for people.
And I know the details aren't worked out yet, but you're hoping to get down to the Rockaways on Thanksgiving Day?
Yes, we're trying to be there for a mass at one of the parishes.
Okay, great. Bishop, thanks so much for coming back.
Okay, good to be with you.
And that is all for tonight. Be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.